If I'm on stage or it's a print interview, it's Otheyn Vermithrax, but otherwise my name is Isaac Faulk. For example, the first track on the record, "The Taste of Immortal Blood," was the first song that I wrote for the album, and it was the first song that also felt like, okay, this is the new direction. Taking on the clean vocals from as myself, that was like a new thing for me as well. Yeah, I mean, well, it goes back to the puritanical beginnings of America. Absolutely, Stormkeep exists, because of those bands in the 90s. It's incredible that it's one of the major exports of Norway is black metal at this point.
Hello, everyone. Today with us is Isaac, or as for Stormkeep, for Stormkeep Universe. I don't know, maybe you prefer your scenic name. So, do you want to introduce yourself today?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm on stage or it's a print interview, it's Otheyn Vermithrax, but otherwise my name is Isaac Folk.
Nice to meet you. And today we're here to talk about your album, your newest album, second Stormkeep's album that came out in June. Great artwork, great music. I enjoyed this Simple Black album. So far, what has been the response from your end that you see?
Yeah, I mean, so far the response has been very positive. We've had a lot of traction with a lot of people being interested in the band since the last album as well. And a lot of it's positive. I know some people, maybe were not as excited about the different direction that we took, but for us, that's just kind of an important part of the journey. So I would just say, to me, that's just to be expected in the realm of things. Whenever you're working on something new, you always know that you can't please everybody, but that's just how the world works.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the changes. Some people don't like it. So I think some of the changes that I notice is like a little bit dialing back on the dungeon synth and dungeon synth intros, and also adding clean vocals. So how did that transformation came about?
Yeah, so that was actually a very specific thing that we did on purpose, was to kind of take away a lot of the in-betweens of the dungeon synth, go away from some of the older keyboard sounds like Casio sounds and the kind of MIDI tracks that sound more like, early 90s type of, fantasy ambient, Mortice or Kirkwood or any of that type of stuff. But we wanted to kind of go in a more dramatic, darker direction with, real symphonic sounds. And so in order to do that, we kind of built from the ground up, and that was a conscious effort after a number of years of kind of like figuring out where that direction would go. And for example, the first track on the record, "The Taste of Immortal Blood," was the first song that I wrote for the album, and it was the first song that also felt like, okay, this is the new direction. It felt very much like this was the template of the sonic palette that we were going to use. And then it went from there, and just kind of each song kind of developed into what it was. And using the clean vocals more was somewhat conscious, but I've also said every song asks for what it gets. Basically, like every song will kind of like feel like it wants to have something on it, and so we always just like listen for that. And like a lot of times it's guitar riffs first, and then everything else kind of builds from there. But yeah, like taking on the clean vocals from as myself, that was like a new thing for me as well. That was a challenge and a very kind of like a unique thing for me, doing it for the whole record as well, as I had done the harsh vocals on all the records, but had always had Shield Anvil, also known as Jake Rogers from Gallowbraid and Kaladin Brood, and Visigoth, people probably know him from. He was on the last couple releases, and he was not on this record only because I felt like it made sense for me to kind of tackle that, and a lot of the lyrics felt like it would be odd for someone else to sing them. So I felt like it was just this kind of like natural thing, as well as having kind of like a more gothic influence that I thought made more sense for my timbre. Um, and yeah, so like a lot of those changes just kind of happened naturally. Also, along with the storyline and where the last record ended and where this new record started, and that felt like a necessary piece to kind of like go in that direction.
And for storyline, I don't know, for folks who don't know that all your albums are conceptual and they happen within the realm of Elda, world of Elda, your fantasy world. And in your head, do you have the whole story for multiple albums, or do they develop with every album?
Yeah, I mean, so usually I have kind of like an overarching idea of like where the story is going. But yeah, like when we get into the nitty-gritty of each record, that kind of takes form. On Tales of Other Time, for example, that record was very much written musically first, and then the storyline kind of came about. And then since that story already existed in the world, kind of like already was there, even since Goldrum, it made sense for us to kind of like work on story ideas before going into the music on this one. And going back to what I was saying about kind of the in between time, there was a time after making Tales of Other Time where I was writing a lot of stuff that was very much kind of the same style as that record. And it just didn't really feel like it was moving the needle very much. It kind of felt like it was just kind of a rehash in Tales of Other Time Part 2 kind of songs. And so it felt very important to us to like start from kind of like a clean slate and basically go in this and see where we are in the storyline first and then kind of build from there. And so, going into this story, the seer is now basically in dire straits from the Dragon Queen being now awakened. He's now cursed from the Serpent Stone and has to consume human essence and human souls. And so he's basically grappling with that throughout the entire album. And so that just made sense to, okay, like let's have kind of a story structure for each song, and then each song could kind of like exist from that story.
And yeah, on artwork, we see the Queen
Mm-hmm.
and the Seer and the Dragon, and you collaborated with a famous British comic artist in this. Can you tell us more about that collaboration?
Yeah, if anybody knows Simon Bisley, they probably know him from, either Heavy Metal Magazine or doing covers for bands like Danzig and stuff like that. So it was very much his style felt very much in line with what we were doing and what we were trying to work on as a band and the new direction that the new album was going. He has like a much darker palette, than and also kind of like an over the top, working with comic books and stuff like that. But also, he's also a metalhead and he's interested in heavy metal music. He is a musician also, so he really understands like kind of the vibe of what we were going for. And so I just, kind of cold called him. I sent him an email and just described what the album was about and what, the whole picture. I kind of had like a very basic idea of what the picture was going to look like. Gave him a reference of Frank Frazetta, the Sea Witch, and he's a big fan of Frank Frazetta. I mean, a very big influence on a lot of that stuff, and used that as like a jumping off point, and gave him kind of like the details of like who the Dragon Queen is and all this stuff. And then, yeah, after that, he did some sketches, sent me the painting, and then we did some edits with him, just like making it a bit darker in tone and doing some stuff like that. But yeah, overall, I mean, he really captured the essence of what the album was doing and like where we were at, um, with our ideas and the fantasy world of Elda kind of coming into an illustration. It's like all you can really hope for when you commission something.
Funny fact that like I have my other like personal channel on like YouTube where I post reels with vinyls. I started to collect them recently, so I did yours. and finally YouTube marked it as adult content because of the breast.
Yeah,
And
of course. Yeah.
for me, like growing up in Europe and then moving to US, and sometimes like hearing story of censorship in US, I'm like, this is kind of like dumb. We have like, you go to museums or you go to the cities in Europe, there are like antique statues that are naked, and it's completely fine. The albums like Dimmu Borgir, I went to university wearing the Puritanical euphoric misanthropia cover on my T-shirt, and it was fine. Where here, Dimmu Borgir releases, they have different, just like one piece of paper cover for US market.
Yeah.
What's your take on this, like kind of stupid censorship?
Yeah, I mean, well, it goes back to the puritanical beginnings of America and the early days of, basically like telling, women that they should cover up, in a very Christian kind of way. You know, all of the people that left Europe to come to America were all the people that had these like very, very puritanical views about the human body, about even Christ and his place in the, status as God and all this stuff. And, you just get like a country started by these people, and they've continued this puritanical view on sex. And then you see that in America it has like the highest rates of porn addiction and like, just like kind of like really weird views of sex, really weird views of women and all this stuff. And so, to me, that's just a byproduct of this puritanical, using that word in the context of Dimmu Borgir. It's funny, but that is really like what we're talking about in America. Um, and yeah, to me, it's like, yeah, it's like it's art, and also to me, if anyone asks me about it, it's the Dragon Queen is the powerful figure in this piece of art. It's not about sexualizing her. Obviously, it's over the top and she's very well endowed and all that stuff, but like she's not in a submissive position. It's not demeaning or anything like that. And so to me, it's more about the force of nature of like dark feminine energy, which I think is a terrifying thing to many men. And many men are, basically can't understand what that is, and want to control women and tell them what to do and how they should, what they should wear and how they should live. And I've been in Europe many times. I've probably flown there 20 something times in my life, and something that I find very interesting is being in Europe and like women being totally fine, not wearing their tops, at the river or like whatever, there's nudist beaches, there's all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, which there are in the States kind of, but it's just such a different attitude. And what you end up getting in Europe is just like a very different view of nudity in general. In America, it's seen as sexual first, and in Europe, I think it's just, oh, that's anatomy until something sexual happens. And I think that's kind of just the biggest difference. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've heard this from a couple of people, like, oh, I can't show your album cover like on my thing, and it's like, obviously. In a way, we kind of knew that would be some aspect of it in America. Like obviously everybody's going to talk about that when that is on the cover, like that just ends up being a point of conversation. um but yeah, to me it just felt like a natural thing, like I don't know, tits on an album cover for a metal band is not that crazy to me, but
Yeah, same as the works of ancient Greece, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Continuing the conversation of aesthetics, like a lot of black metal bands nowadays, they don't have corpse paint, like they don't have the spikes, leather. But for you, like if you look at your press photo, right, you're in snow in the mountains, what I assume is Colorado, your home state, and there are like shoulder pads with spikes, giving you like Emperor old time vibes. And the music is also like to me it gives like 90s Sinful Black Emperor Demon Borgir vibes. It probably is like very dear to you, that era of like black metal, simple black metal music? Is that, and like what made you decide to consciously like carry this forward with your music?
Absolutely. Stormkeep exists, because of those bands in the 90s, and that's the music that got me interested in extreme metal in the first place when I was 14, 23 years ago. So I mean that was like what pushed me into getting interested in playing music, and picking up drums and picking up a guitar was because of those bands, like those symphonic black metal bands, and then also just going down that rabbit hole of all the other, like, original black metal, Norwegian black metal, and like the Greek black metal, and first wave and all that stuff. But it started with the symphonic stuff, and so it's always held an important part in my musical journey. And it's also kind of a style that I think, it became very passe at a certain time. At sometime in the 2000s, I think it became overblown, and like, there were too many bands that, a lot of bands were not doing it very well. Some of the classic bands either broke up or fell off, and the style kind of went dead for, I would say, 15 years or 20 years or something like that. Um, and so Stormkeep, already in our original stuff, our first stuff was, we want to play keyboard black metal. That was always from the very, very beginning the idea. And to us, the keyboard black metal, there is an era of it that is super good, and that we want to carry that flame, and we want to like continue off, kind of as if it didn't die. And that's kind of like where we're at, with the band. That being said, we always want to inject it with something that makes it unique and something new. So, especially on Tales of Other and on this new record, we've consciously kind of put in other influences and other things and other ideas that maybe those bands didn't do back then, and kind of put our own stamp on it and make it into something that's kind of a culmination of many different styles of black metal. There's like some of that Greek stuff in there as well. There's some power metal, there's gothic stuff, and that all kind of blends into whatever like Stormkeep is doing at the time.
And I'm also obviously a fan of 90s simple black metal. And like this year for me, it was cool to hear your album and also hear Worm's Necropalace. And like for both, I'm like, yeah, that's that music. Really love it. And like, what's your take on this like simple black revival of like 90s sounding simple black revival that's happening in North America, not in Norway, but here?
I don't want to disparage any other bands or anything like that, but I will say it was when Stormkeep started doing what we're doing, which, like I said, is a continuation of what we began the band as. There were no other bands like really doing this, and it's not to, except for obviously the original bands, and so like we came to it in a way that I was like, no, this is not what anyone else is doing. And I felt like there was a thing missing, that for me was, this big thing of symphonic black metal basically had been dead for a while, like I said before. And that's why Stormkeep started, was to do that. And so it's really cool, like if these other bands are getting into that too. I think that's a great thing to like expand this palette, and to, grow the genre, and, maybe get past some of those hurdles that it ran into in the 2000s, where I think in a lot of ways it did become, maybe too commercial or too, oversaturated. I think a lot of times, a lot of those bands ended up going more symphonic and less metal, in general, and like kind of lost like what metal was going on. And so, yeah, for me, it's like, yeah, if we can continue that in a conscious and deliberate way that's true to, whatever, what if any artist feels like they are genuinely pulled to that, I think that's a great thing. And it is interesting that it's happening in North America. I think, when I was growing up, that sound made a huge impact on a lot of us, I think, at that age. in North America, and I think it was big in Europe as well. But there was something about the European sound of black metal at that time that I think resonated with the youth of the early 2000s in a way that, not many other things have, So I think, in a sense, a lot of us are probably just pulling from that again and being like, hey, actually, that stuff that everyone decided wasn't cool anymore, it actually is good. There's many of those records are actually very good. And pulling out your kind of those records that a lot of people, yeah, like didn't like, and now it's really great to see too. Like, I'm wearing the shirt, but Old Man's Child, for example, now back together and playing shows, and actually their first concert back was at Fire in the Mountains last year, and so in North America, that was like, actually they did a show in Europe, I think, before that, but still, it was one of their first shows was back in North America, so that you can see that the hunger for that stuff is definitely here.
What's your take on the latest Dimmu Borgir?
I have to be totally honest that I haven't really heard it. I heard a snippet of one song, and I've I'll be honest, I kind of fell off of Demon Borgir even after Death Cold Armageddon. I thought In Sorte Diaboli was decent, but it was not as much of a big jump as the previous albums. And then after that, I thought it kind of decreased in value quite kind of consistently. So yeah, I haven't really listened. I haven't listened to Ionian either. Actually, I haven't even kept up with a lot of that stuff. But to me, still, I mean, like the run of For Alted to Death Cult Armageddon is like, every album is good. So I mean, it's hard to beat, having that many records in a row that are really good. It's like it's hard to say, like, okay, you can make another 10 really good records. I don't know. It's hard for bands to keep that amount of longevity, I guess.
It's crazy to see like Emperor only released 4 albums, but they're
Yeah.
hot, they're touring, and play like, major festivals every year.
Yeah, I think that is so respectable, and obviously a lot of people are like, oh, they're just like going to get paid, at playing shows, but like they do that because they love doing it and they genuinely like playing those songs. Isan also has his solo stuff that he's continuously doing. Samuth has, his other projects, Wretched End, and other stuff. I'm a big fan of Zyklon as well, which hasn't been around for a while, but they all had their different things, that they were involved in. Um, I think it's super respectable to put out 4 records and be like, hey, there's nothing more that we could do together that's gonna be better than what we did. And a lot of people hate on Prometheus, and I actually really like that record. But you can already tell that maybe it's dissipating in the creative output that they already were having, which is crazy because they were in their like mid 20s when they put out that record. So, already had put out 4 of the greatest metal albums of all time, in my opinion, by the time they were in their mid 20s. So that's a pretty high level to bar to cross, if you're going to try to do anything else in that sphere. And then, to me, it's like, yeah, just like continue playing the stuff. I mean, it's great also to see them play live. I got to tour with them, and getting to see them play live where you know, it is that lineup of those guys. Like it's the guys who made those records, and they're performing it like just playing anthem stuff. It's great to see live because you get to see and feel and hear like all of the different like parts that maybe you can't hear even on the record. It's actually a great experience to see.
And speaking about involvement in other bands and projects, you yourself are in multiple projects, multiple bands. So how time-wise that works, or how also like creatively it works to like not bleed any ideas, musical ideas into other bands, or are they like pretty well separated?
Um, yeah, I mean it's always a battle of like the time and like where to put it. at this point, Blood Incantation is my main touring band, and that's where I spend the most time on the road. But that's not to say that, we don't have we still work creatively on all the other projects, and to me, making and releasing records is like the number one thing that I want to do. That's my favorite part of making music is the creative process. Playing shows is great, and for example, Blood Incantation gets to do a lot of really cool shows like that. So I'm happy to do that, and that's like a huge part of my life as well. But not every band needs to do that, and so that's kind of the way that we've figured out how to balance the time. Is that Stormkeep is never going to tour the same amount that Blood Incantation does, and that's okay. And that's actually for me that kind of even makes more sense in the context of like what type of black metal we're making. It is it kind of needs to be a special event, and it needs to have kind of like the stuff in place for it to it can't be like just your average bar with like a Coors Light sign on behind you, and that would kind of ruin the vibe. So to me, it always needs to be like, okay, this band is going to perform at like a specific level in a specific type of place. Whereas like Blood Incantation, we were grinding on the road for years and years and years. So yeah, just every project gets to has its own lane, and it's actually been great that the three of us in Stormkeep were also in Wayfarer, so we balance those bands as well. But it's three of us together, so we understand each other very well, and like we've been playing music together for so long, so it's very easy.
And for this album, for Stormkeep's album, you released it on Vesperian label, and I think Wayfarer also puts out work on Vesperian, right?
Yeah, Wayfarer has also joined, and we also have some Denver label mates in Dreadnought, and yeah, like a lot of really great bands already coming out.
And how was that collaboration with a German label that released your album?
Yeah, so this is a new label started by Philip Schulte, and he used to work at Century Media for many many years as the vice CEO, and he's actually the one who signed Blood Incantation and Wayfarer to Century Media originally. He's always been really interested in the same types of stuff that we're doing. He's very knowledgeable, and he's actually a fan of the music, which is a huge thing in the industry. You don't find this too often of people who are genuinely fans of the music first, and then they want to be involved. And it's not about money for him. It's just about the love of the music, and so yeah, it made sense when he wanted to make a new label, and we were already kind of talking about the Stormkeep moving from Von Records, and Wayfarer kind of came from Century Media, and he brought Wayfarer with him for this new label, and so it was a very natural thing for us. I've known him since 2019 now, so it's just been a great experience of building that relationship, and he gives us complete creative freedom as well, which is an amazing thing. And he believes in what we're doing. So every time we have ideas and we bring it to him, he's just like 100% into it. So it's a great place to be.
You mentioned that touring is probably not something that Stormkeep will have a lot of, but still, what are your current touring plans? Will we be able to see you here in Santa Cruz, where I live, for example, Santa Cruz, California?
We'll have to see. I don't. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure how things are going to roll out, but we're looking towards 2027 for some performances. As it is right now, we're just happy to have the record out as we were working on it for the last 2 years. So glad that people can finally hear it. And then yeah, someday we would love to play it live.
And talking about the venues, you mentioned you want some like venue needs to be special, not the bar with Coors Light signs. What's your dream venue? And is the like home state Red Rock Amphitheater one of those?
Oh yeah, I mean, for any of my, I mean, I would love to play Red Rocks someday. That's definitely up there, and I think is definitely feasible in some way. I'm sure, but yeah, I mean, I've played a number of places with Blood Incantation that were incredible places, but for Stormkeep, we played Beyond the Gates in Norway 3 years ago. That's a great festival for us, and playing in Norway for a band like that is just kind of an incredible opportunity to basically go to the the homeland of the stuff that we're interested in. So, that's always an interesting thing. And also, just performing at decent theaters, nice places that have, you know, take people away from the normal everyday world and they can enter into the world of Elda with us.
Oh, it was for me funny when I was like student back in Ukraine, and you would watch this like Dimmu Borgir perform at Grammy in like 90s. See all these like guys in tuxedos and then cocktail dresses, ladies. Right? It's all like very formal, and then these guys in chorus band come out like rah.
Yeah, yeah. It's incredible that it's one of the major exports of Norway is black metal at this point.
When I was in Norway last year, I went to like Trondheim has the music museum, and you go there and you see you can blast at like half museum. They have like big screen, and then you can pick different bands. And I was just standing there playing like Dimmu Borgir, Enslaved, Emperor, like all the bands. And yeah, for them it's just like it's just part of our culture. It's not some underground niche subculture thing. That's just normal culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing how integrated it is into their regular lives. Whereas, like, yeah, in the United States, it's not that way at all. So,
It's not country. Yeah.
no, yeah, exactly. It's not part of the culture.
Thank you a lot for your time today. And any farewell words for the fans of yours?
Yeah, just thank you for listening. And if we touched on something that resonates with people, we're just happy that that exists and that we can make that connection. And yeah, hopefully see some people out on the road someday.
TheMetalist.com. Subscribe.